Glad to be here. Nice to show you a little bit of our work. I brought a lot of slides, so I will click very quickly because I guess some people are hungry. So, but it's nice to show you around. Well, maybe let's start just with a little bit of an introduction what we actually do. I mean, we are landscape architects. And actually, what's landscape architecture about? I mean, many people, also in Belgium, where I'm originally from, it's about garden design. Actually, that's not what we are doing. Felixx is based in the Netherlands, and actually, landscape architecture in the Netherlands is not about garden design, it's about creating land. It's about fighting against the water. This is a height map of the country. Everything was blue is below seawater level. So basically, landscape architecture is the art of kind of making land out of what's actually sea or water. And that actually kind of results in very spectacular landscapes that I guess most of you know or at least have seen. Very, well, green and watery landscapes, very old ways of kind of draining the land with canals and ditches. But also cities are really based on the way of organizing the water system. This is Amsterdam, where you can see that the city is completely organized around the canal system. And also, well, it's not only kind of draining it, it's really the art of the creation of land. These are old plans of areas where new ditches are created, which kind of creates a spatial system, which you can see today still in how the land actually looks. And it's not only about the land, it's also about how we deal with the water and the rivers. It's about the delta works, which are actually closing off the rivers from the sea, because the seawater level is higher than the river water level, which actually creates these kind of very, well, interesting, mysterious, super artificial, but at the same time also natural landscapes. It's a very particular way of how to deal with nature, culture, and actually how the Netherlands looks like because of this duality. It's also about, not about draining the land, it's also about creating new land. So really pumping up the water, building a dike around a certain area, pumping out the water of that area, pumping it to the sea or the rivers below it, which kind of creates spectacular places. Not only countryside areas, but also this is a new residential area. Well, it's not that new anymore. Close to Amsterdam, where new and a lot of residential buildings are built. Well, this kind of creation of land really creates also a cultural identity. The windmills, the dikes, I guess that's something that most of the people know, but also kind of strange artifacts about crossing rivers on different water levels. And actually, it was a very artificial way of dealing with that. And this picture shows that, well, on one hand, you have the very artificial way, on the other hand, the more natural way of kind of dealing with this water management. And that's actually something which kind of developed during the last decades. First, it was really fighting against water, and now it's really about working with the water. So this is the plan for the rivers, enlarging the riverbeds so that they have space to flood, and actually through that creating new landscapes. And this is an example of how we deal with coastal protection by creating actually sand engines that are creating by nature new dunes. And actually coming from that base, that's actually the belief with what we work with. Actually, we believe in space and spatial planning to change the world and to make it a better place. And to actually use that knowledge from the Netherlands, fighting already hundreds of years against land and water, to use that actually to deal with the current global climate and social challenges that we're facing. So we think that we can, as planners and as spatial planners, adapt to environmental challenges that are kind of resulting from mistakes from the past, but also that we can give shape to the kind of the innovation of the future. And of course, that's a task which is a bit bigger than me. So we invented our own world improver, a kind of a modest hero that's traveling the world to kind of implement this knowledge and realize happy environments and healthy environments. And the way we are doing that is with a positive attitude. We think that, well, at least we should try and we should give it a chance. But at the same time, we are very conscious about the time frame that we are working in, that it's not, well, that we are working on serious problems that require serious solutions. And that responsible attitude is very kind of well embedded in our working methodology and the way we are working and the attitude that we have towards projects. And therefore, we really combine research, and we have strong ties with different universities and research institutes. But at the same time, we really emphasize on the importance of building. We are not researchers. We actually are the party who implements research into real projects. And we do that in existing markets for landscape architects. There's a project in Germany. So, well, their landscape architecture and climate adaptation is a kind of established practice. But at the same time, we also think that the big challenges are not only in the markets that we all know. So that's also the reason why we, as an office, try to explore, find new markets, not necessarily the markets that we're used to, but the markets where we think that we can be relevant. So actually, in our office, that's a bit what we try to say is that's kind of adventurous, kind of world improvers. That's a little bit what we all try to be in the office. We are a team of 35 people with very diverse backgrounds, landscape architects, urban planners, but also scientists and product designers. And what we are doing, we call that high performance landscapes, because we think that a landscape should do more than just be pretty or be functional, but it should be both. So we kind of create generous concepts in which we kind of try to align and bring all these elements together. The things we are working on are public spaces, master plans, landscape transformations, research projects, and also big scale infrastructure projects. And I would like to show a few of them to try to explain a little bit like what we do and how we work. So I start with a project in Berat. It's in Albania. It's the blue dot on the map. And actually this is a UNESCO protected heritage site along a river with a, well, this is how the river looks, this is how the city looks. And the task was to come up with, or to develop a proposal for, to make the city flood resistant. So we looked at the history of the city and we found this was the last flooding of Berat, which was in 1953. Which doesn't mean that it's not that bad, but at least it's not a very urgent problem. But basically, the real problem of the city was that during 95% of the year, this is the situation. So there's a very small stream in the riverbed, and a big part of the riverbed is filled with low-quality vegetation. And then during a few days of the year, it's completely filled because on the mountains, the snow is melting, and a lot of water is coming down. And because of that, actually, the morphology of the river is changing every year. You can see that in these two pictures, the island and the river is at a different location. And, well, although we could see that as a characteristic of the spot, it actually prevents the city to really use the riverbed because it's constantly adjusting. So we proposed to actually guide the river by putting structures in the riverbed in such a way that we actually kind of fix the way of flow. And we did that together with UNESCO IHE, which is a water institute in Delft, calculating a flow model, which actually where we have to put these elements so that we create natural sedimentation and that these islands kind of naturally grow. In such a way that actually during low water, we have a river close to the city and a big island which is usable for recreational purposes. When the water level is a little bit rising, we create the wetlands around the embankments of the island, but it's still accessible. And actually then during these few peak moments, the top of the island is protected with the walls that we put, but the rest of the riverbed is filled with the water. And actually in such a way, we did not really design a riverfront. We did not really protect the city from flooding, but by understanding the way the water works, we kind of, well, we intervened in this running of the water, and that kind of resulted in a usable landscape. So it's not only safe, it's also a recreational landscape. Actually, the similar way of looking at water as a kind of base principle of how we organize our cities and the environments that we live in is what we did in Yangon. Yangon is the former capital of Myanmar. Well, maybe you know it as Burma. It's located over here next to Bangladesh and Thailand. We were there a few years ago. Of course, the political situation changed a bit. We are part of the team of UN Habitat. And after the election of Aung San Suu Kyi, there was a lot of hope and positive thinking that after the years of the military regime, the country would open up. So a lot of people moved from the countryside to the cities because they thought that they had better chances over there. But of course, these cities, they were not really prepared for that. So a lot of informal settlements grew in front of the industrial zones along the city center. And to prepare for that, we worked together with UN Habitat on an urban extension site. It's this one, it's Tantabin. This is the existing city center. It's 100 square kilometer. It was one of the 7 planned extension sites. And in Tantabin, there was projected to house up to 1.5 million people. So it's a very big area, and they had 7 of these. But if you look at the city at the moment in Yangon, I mean, this happens very frequently. It floods. And this is how Tantabin looks. It's a low area. It's a rice field, which is suffering from heavy water issues. This is the protection against the river. I mean, maybe you're not scared from the Netherlands. We are scared because there are no dikes, there is no protection. So this is a very dangerous area considering water. So what we did is we actually kind of first developed a water system, having 2 chunks of urban areas around the central core, which is infiltrating, draining, and reusing the water. Of course, dikes along the rivers. And based on that, actually, the whole urban planning scheme is organized. So actually, the water, with the central green park, 2 areas, big urban development areas, and all the other urban development schemes, so infrastructure, density, program distribution, phasing, they're all based on that very basic understanding of how the water system in such a city should operate. We developed that together with the local planners to help them actually to understand what are the principles of city planning so that they could apply this also in these 7 other areas. And in the end, these guidelines were presented to the new Minister of Public Affairs. And after that, being elaborated into planning procedures. Back to the Netherlands, we didn't only use kind of water as a development structure, but also how actually we can understand our culture, the background of it, and how we actually can reuse it and in such a way, because we looked in Dordrecht at how we actually can reuse historical dike structures. This is actually the water protection system of the Netherlands. It's not a map that we have made, it's from our friends from Lola. And this is how they previously actually protected the Netherlands with a small-scale network of small dikes. This is how it's currently protected. We kind of scaled up a bit. So these dikes, they were pretty much everywhere. So they're very characteristic. They define the identity of the Netherlands to a very large extent. And actually by these big structures, I already showed a few of them. Actually, the Netherlands kind of changed its kind of protection structures on a different scale. So the rivers, the sea, but also very big national dike structures. So these old dikes, well, you can see we're not very respectful to them anymore. That's a bit kind of a Dutch attitude. If we don't need it, then we don't use it. So it needs to be functional, or otherwise it disappears. And we thought that's a pity, because, well, they served for a pretty long time to protect the country. So can we actually project new agendas on these old structures? So, because, well, actually this is what happened. Because of these guys, we don't need them anymore. There's also no money for them anymore because, well, they were paid by the kind of water protection funds. So we looked at Dordrecht. Dordrecht is actually an island with rivers on both sides. It's a city close to Roterdammu. And it has an urban core and a kind of a greener area. And, well, it has a very interesting history on how it grew. And it's also still that history is still very visible in how the layout of the historical dikes. You can see a few pictures. They're still very visible in the country at the moment. So this is how actually the island grew. And of course, these timelines, they are not very relevant for us anymore because at the moment, these dikes, they operate as one coherent system. So that's also how we looked at them, not as kind of separate dikes. Because maybe that's good to add is that actually this kind of the conquering of the land that doesn't happen like in one go. How these things happen is that they first have one piece, and then a few years later they add another one, and they add another one and another one. So that's also how these dikes grow. So all these dikes, they have a different age. Actually, piece by piece, these pieces of land kind of grew. So we looked at this dike network as one structure. We projected actually 4 agendas on it. How can we actually improve the water management in Dordrecht? How can we improve the kind of green structure in the city? How can we guide urban development? Because Dordrecht wants to build 10,000 new houses. And also, how can we improve the infrastructural framework? And we kind of superposed all of them on this old dike structure. Next to that, we also thought it's interesting that actually the nature of these dikes changed, because dikes were always kind of meant to enclose something. That's not necessary anymore because there is a big guy protecting us. So basically, can we actually use them not as a kind of enclosing structure, but as a connecting one, because they're now part of a bigger network. So Dordrecht is located here. Actually, this is the Randstad, which is a metropolitan area in the Netherlands where you have Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague. This is Rotterdam, this is Amsterdam, this is The Hague. And actually this is a much greener area, and it's on the edge of a big nature reserve. It's called the Biesbos in the Netherlands. So this is Rotterdam and this is the Biesbos. So Dordrecht is actually a little bit at this transition between these two big things. So can we have these dikes as a connecting structure between the Randstad and these nature reserves? Can we project all these 4 agendas? How can we improve water, green, urban development, and infrastructure in the city? So we developed 3 models. One is the Biesbos, where we said, like, look, Dordrecht becomes actually part of this Biesbos structure. So these dikes, they become big green parks, ecological corridors. They actually continue into the city, and they look like this. So we have new development areas with new housing typologies within an ecological character. We define typologies for the transformation of these dikes in the city and outside the city, realizing actually all these different agendas. But at the same time, we also developed another scenario where we said Dordrecht is not part of the nature reserve. It's actually part of the Randstad, the metropolitan area. It's the last place where we built. So we kind of developed it as a, this doesn't work. We developed it as a kind of castle with fortresses on the edges, where the dikes, they're not really ecological zones. They are parks because they connect to the big city. They get recreational functions along it. New big-scale development areas are located along them to activate these things. Again, all these agendas are realized. The third one is where Dordrecht doesn't become connected to either the nature or the city, but it becomes a kind of self-sufficient island, which means that actually we use these dikes to fulfill the environmental and social needs of the island itself. So it becomes a place where we farm, where we produce energy, where we kind of absorb, regenerate clean water, and actually also organize all the social facilities along these dikes. And then, again, we realized all these different agendas. So in that way, we try to show that old structures do not necessarily need to be removed to fulfill the new agendas that we are facing, because then we can give them a new meaning in that sense. So this is again like these 3 years. And these are the big scale transformation strategies. A few. We also work on master planning projects. This is a master plan that we are currently working on for a new development area in Eindhoven. It's located over here. This is Rotterdam again. And this is how the plan looks at the moment. It's located next, the program of the site is that we have like 1,500 houses and 12 hectares of business areas, which we try to position there in a new way, because it's located next to this. This is a big urban development area of the 90s, So this is not old, just on the record. It's a very kind of fake historical typology, and it's actually located next to our site. So basically what we did is that we actually scaled up one of these building blocks, put them on the plot next to it, which is our plot. And we kind of created a new hybrid between landscape and buildings, because these old building blocks, they have a very strict boundary between buildings and landscape, between public and private. And actually all of these things we tried to question to create a new type of living living environment. So in all these different sub-areas, we created different ways of merging buildings and landscape. And actually the goal was that what's kind of very interesting about the area next to it is that you have a very traditional way of organizing production grounds, urban areas and nature areas. And we wanted to make a new area where all these things were merged. So we based it on the traditional building blocks. So we have a nature structure, a productive landscape, and a built environment. And we kind of replotted this entire land to turn it into a productive landscape. So we looked at the different plots, the different locations. We added functionalities for energy production, water production, food production on that. And we organized the entire thing into a social landscape in strips. So we created new communities, and all these things are, well, each strip has a certain amount of residents that have a certain need on food, water, biodiversity, energy, and recreational functions. And actually within that strip, they need to be circular and they need to provide everything. So you need to be friends with your neighbor, because if you don't want to produce food, you have to produce energy because he's producing your food. So actually we create new social connections by the way of organizing the landscape. And then we actually thought it should not be a separate thing, but it should be a connected landscape. So we added a new layer of, in the history of dikes and canals, a new layer of landscape structures which are actually unifying the productive landscape, the natural landscape, and the residential landscape. And actually these lines, they add to what's happening besides it. So on these linear structures, we planted trees that are attracting the insects for the pest control of the crops that are grown. They also absorb the water for irrigation and infiltration, or they are kind of three-dimensional elements which are protecting the wind. And in such a way, we actually create a very interesting new hybrid between a pretty dense residential area with a lot of production grounds, and a kind of circular economy, and also an interesting system for water and ecology. We're currently working on a plan to kind of turn this into plot passports to kind of ensure that everybody takes this responsibility. Actually, the biggest challenge is to control it, because it requires data control to, well, verify whether people are producing the energy that they are told to be producing. And of course that brings some privacy issues. But this is, I think, a very interesting way of how we actually can reorganize the way we are living. It's not only about ecological inclusivity, it's also about social tasks. We worked on the Asylum Seeker Center in Ter Apel in the Netherlands. This is the biggest reception center of the Netherlands. Actually, it's supposed to house up to 2,000 people. It's located over here. Again, for your orientation, this is Amsterdam. So actually, it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. You have a few of these asylum seeker centers in the Netherlands. Ter Apel is the biggest one. You have emergency accommodations where people are coming in, and then you have reception centers. These reception centers, they often are very temporary. Ter Apel is actually the only one which has which is built for the next 30 years. Yeah, well, this is what this one says. So it's a permanent facility. This is how the area looks, or looked actually before we built it. We started this project in 2015 in the middle of the crisis. So it was a very tough period to work on it. It was in full it was fully functioning during the period that we worked on it, and it also had to stay functioning during construction. It also was a kind of a strange political situation to work on this, because the government was attacked a few times because they were turning holiday resorts into permanent or temporary reception centers. So there was a big opposition that these reception centers were too luxurious, as you can see here. So we always got the kind of message that it should be kind of modest and efficient, and it shouldn't be too pretty, let's say. At the same time, this was how the existing facility looked like, so there was not, I mean, everything you did, it was only kind of improving what we had. So also in the office, this was quite a challenge, let's say, like how do we work on it, what's our kind of moral position against. Also because the fact where they located it is, it's 150 kilometers away from Amsterdam. It doesn't, so that this is where people kind of arrive when they had a long travel. Finally ended up in the Netherlands. They're transported to a place in the middle of nowhere, not even connected to the village in this area, because this is where the village is located of Ter Apel, which is already a very small city. And then this is the position of this asylum seeker center, so it's even detached from that community. This is how you arrive from the station. There is a sign to the center, to the refugee center. And this is the way towards the asylum seeker center. So you're out of the community. This is how these people arrive. They're isolated. This is how it looks. They're detached. They're fenced off. This is for their own protection, because it's not, they can walk away. That's not a problem. But there might be people coming in that try to pick them up and transport them somewhere else. That's not the idea. And this is also how these houses look like. There are 8 people in such a house that do not know each other. So just so there is really a big lack of privacy in this area. So for us, this was quite a thing. Like, do we want to do this? But actually, we thought that we could be meaningful in trying to make it as good as we could. Designing it not as a camp, but as a temporary, or as a village for temporary residents. So we tried to see how we can actually morph this program and design it in such a way as a village. So we have a central core, which is the existing line of trees that we put. We put a school at the entrance, so not a reception center, but a public facility with kids. That leads to a central hut, where we kind of concentrated all the sport facilities and also the different services. And around that, we kind of organized the different buildings into smaller communities around the courtyard, giving each courtyard a specific design, a specific organization, so that people knew where they were, because that's something, I mean, they arrive there and all these houses look pretty much the same, so it's quite hard to find where you are located. You can also not really use signs, because everybody speaks another language. Also, graphs is tricky, because they have a different meaning in different cultures. So, and in between these different courtyards, we actually did nothing. We keep them empty, just to give also some freedom, not to program everything, but that there is room for people to kind of move away and take some distance from the other people in that area to kind of think and, well, just be. And then, this was actually the biggest fight, is actually we kind of raised the terrace zone in the front of these houses, covering it with a roof, so that people cannot walk in front of these houses, to kind of enlarge the privacy, but also that people could sit outside, which kind of enlarged their living environment quite a lot. so that actually the kind of the sense of privacy is bigger in this area. And then on top of, in the center of each courtyard, there was a square which was connecting the courtyard to the sport zone. And there was a washing facility where people actually could meet on the square. Actually, it was quite a challenging project for us. I think it's quite, well, of course there are a lot of do's and don'ts on this, but I think it kind of brought a quite good environment, at least for people to arrive. And it's still fully functioning at the moment. Something a bit more happy. Layered landscapes and doesn't only mean like kind of stacking different functions. It also means stacking different timelines. We worked on Smakkelaarsveld, which is an area in Utrecht. It's a transferium next to the station. Currently, it's a bike stall, a very big one though. And actually, it had a very interesting kind of history. It was always something else. It was this plot in the city. It was a port, it was a traffic junction, a park, a bicycle parking. After it was a building site. But it was always a kind of monofunctional zone in the city. And actually, if we look at it now, it has to make a new water connection. It also has to be the kind of the public transport connection towards the station. It needs to be a big green park, part of the kind of the green belt through the city center. It's also the entrance from the station to the historical city center. And at the last part, there needs to be a building put on it because that needs to pay for everything. Well, it's the Netherlands. So the market economy also needs to contribute. So we tried to, so we merged actually all these design frames instead of kind of putting them next to each other, creating a 24-hour merged environment. So we created a plan where building and landscape are actually blending together and actually creating 4 rooms where we facilitate all these different functions that the site has at the moment. So the first one is the park. The park is in front of the building. Where people can lay down, relax, sport, but also where there is a big bench along the water where they can sit, where we create a tribune for people to look at the water. And actually then, if you look at the water, the building kind of opens up and the park kind of blends into the canal with an island in the middle of it, where actually the building has a kind of commercial plinth and a square along the water for terraces, where boats can dock along the quay, where on the island there is room for movie nights, but during the daytime this island can be used as a water playground for the kids. And then the crossing between the building and the park and the water, there is a new square, which is actually the new community square on this place. Where we had a playground for the residents of the building, but where also it's a place for a restaurant and a terrace for theater events and music evenings, where people can sit also during the day. The building opens up towards an enclosed yard, which is a quiet place in the middle of the center, where we have places to sit and relax. Read a book and not be disturbed, but also have like kind of small, more communal parties for the residents who are living in the building. Actually, all these different things, they kind of result from blending the building with the landscape and blending all these kind of programmatic agendas on the site. Not making a one-dimensional place, but a place which is actually serving all these different purposes. And that's also something which we, this kind of merging building and landscape is something that is very important in the way we work at projects. It's a project that we do at Orange. I think it's different. This is in Eiburg in Amsterdam. It's a building in the center of a new residential area. It's actually this island that I showed in the very beginning that they made with new residential functions. This is at the center, close to the harbor. And actually, if you cut the building, then you see that the landscape actually continues not only around the building, but also in the building. So there is an entrance square. The building opens up in a big atrium towards a patio in the back, with a walkway actually going up towards a big roof terrace on top of it. So this is how it looks. So the building kind of connects to the surroundings with a kind of small scale, more ecological landscape on this side and a very urban marina on the other side. And then the building kind of goes up, kind of creating this patio in the back, which is an enclosed green spot, further kind of going up towards a courtyard and a garden on the top. On the top we create this kind of eternal holiday feeling, creating a beach around this large daylight towards the atrium, on which there is a water layer, so that it's a kind of celebration of being outside, while actually the place within the building is a very enclosed, silent one, which actually kind of a stilled green forest. And then moving around the building, we see that we have this very green environment with an ecological waterfront, with an island with playing facilities on it, kind of opening up towards the front square, towards the building, with a pavilion on the top of the square, turning back to actually the harbor, where we have a way more urban waterfront with restaurants along it, and in the end, the view of the building towards the harbor. And these kind of projects, they only kind of result from a very kind of close collaboration with architects and all the other parties involved, because I mean they have very strong links with all these things. How it's going? Okay. Are you still okay? That kind of programming landscapes, linking it to the functions in the buildings, that's something that we are kind of developing constantly in the office. We work on a school campus in the north of the Netherlands. It's actually up here. It's a school for 2,000 kids, with 6 different schools kind of organized within one building, within one campus. And actually the concept of this plan is, it's in Groningen, so it's the north of the Netherlands. And well, they have these kind of very typical landscape structures. They're called terpen. They're small hills, kind of a little bit elevated. In the middle is the church, and then all the farms are kind of organized around it. One side towards the church, and the other side towards the agricultural land around it. And actually, this was the main kind of community center of this landscape. So this is also where we based the organization of the school and the campus on. Actually organizing all the buildings around one central spot. And that central spot being the spot where actually all the functions that all these schools share are organized. So the restaurant, the places where they can sit, the library, seating areas, but also kind of an amphitheater on the ground. And then on top of that, there is a stilled garden, which is actually connecting to the educational rooms on the upper levels, looking down towards this patio in the middle. And that's a little bit how it is supposed to look. And then around that building, actually, you have these different schools. We organize the landscape in different landscape rooms, which are connected to the functions in these school buildings. So we have the entrance plaza towards the central heart, and then we have a vegetable garden, which is connected to the school, because there are students who are educated in cooking, but also in restaurant. But there are also students who are doing biology. So they're all kind of connected in this room, with a greenhouse where they can test things but also really grow things, with a restaurant which is kind of in here, where we can have a terrace outside where they actually can exercise, really serving people on that restaurant. Also teachers can eat there. On the other building, we have a construction square, because that's the school where people are really building things, timbermen and building construction men. So it's a place where we have a big barn, which looks like this. We designed it like this, and the facade is completely open, so there is a strong relation between the square and the school. And there are like different possibilities to really construct things and make installations that can be removed. We have an orchard where we organize the kids' farm within it. And on the front side we have the beach with sport facilities around it, and also water playgrounds for kids. Connected to the school, because the sports facilities are used by everyone, and there is also a sports club within this building. Next to that we have a park where we have a tiny forest for the biology students, and an exhibition center for the art students in the area. Altogether, it's part of a bigger campus, which we are also designing at the moment, connecting all these different development fields to this school plot. And it's actually part of a bigger framework, because in the north of the Netherlands they have quite some difficulties to really activate these cores. A big part of the facilities are now organized within one campus. So we're really insisting on having this campus also be accessible as a public park for people, children and kids to be used. I'm almost there. So, well, I added this one because I know that we have someone who likes artificial concrete. So there's we are working in on the this is called the knowledge axis. It's the connection between 2 points. On one hand, the Wageningen University, which is a main agriculture university in the Netherlands, and then there is a World Food Innovation Center in Ede, and they're a little bit separated. So it's Wageningen is here, Ede is here, and in the middle is the station. So they wanted to make this axis recognizable. Well, actually, mostly these guys. Because Wageningen is known, but this one also needs to have some kind of recognition. So we designed actually this 12-kilometer strip between these two zones, and well, we thought, like, how can we make this recognizable? And actually what we tried to do is to actually bring two things together. Like, how can we bring this innovation character of the university to the street? And these two things is on one hand the historical character, the arboretum. Wageningen sold this arboretum recently, because now things are happening in a laboratorium on another completely different scale. So actually, can we bring this kind of old character back, but also giving a glimpse to this kind of new innovation? So actually we made this kind of giant pots, and we put them along this 12-kilometer strip, not on every tree. But we made a linear arboretum along it, so we kind of have all kind of different species, and some of them we put in a pot. These pots are 3D printed to test. This becomes a bit annoying. To test what is actually the possibilities of 3D printing, and we do that with bio-based materials to see how they can actually support that, how they can hold in outside and actually kind of stand these things. They're currently being tested. They're at the nursery for a 2 years period to see how the trees kind of grow and how they hold and how this kind of bio-based material is standing. They're part of a research track at the University of Wageningen to see what is actually the possibilities of this bio-based material, also to use it for really kind of construction purposes like this. These are some nice pictures. This is after this one more. We worked on the entrance square of Brussels Airport in Belgium. This is how this entrance plaza looked like. It was the drop-off zone where cars stopped and taxis stopped. In 2016 there was a terrorist attack. 32 people died. And then actually they closed off this drop-off zone. It was organized at another spot in the airport. They kind of put yellow asphalt over everything. And this is how the entrance of the airport looks at, well, not at the moment anymore, but how it looked. It was a very desolate place with construction sites, because there working on a kind of transformation plan for the entire airport during the next 5 years. So we needed to, we were asked to kind of think about, can you have a temporary installation for 5 years or more that kind of improve the quality of this area and also was flexible to deal with all the kind of flexibility that you need to work on a construction site. So actually what we did is, this is the main direction of this area, being a drop-off zone. You drive, you drop, and then you can, here are all the parking lots actually from the airport. So we changed the direction because it's not about dropping off someone anymore, it's about connecting the parking lots to the gates. And then we kind of marked the different entrances to improve the kind of signage with the logos of the airport. And we added green to kind of create a natural guiding. This green we put in boxes. Boxes which are movable and boxes which are actually flexible to be reduced after this 5-year period on every possible location in the airport. In the end, we construct 100 of these green boxes that are now put there and can be repositioned and kind of green the airport afterwards. This is how it looks. I have a small kind of, I think, a funny movie on the construction. Because of course the construction of all this had to happen. I mean, they cannot really close the airport. So this was quite a challenge actually to do all the painting, because all these lines, they are painted. And then the airport still has to be able to operate. I have not really good pictures yet because it's very brand new. And then all the plants and the boxes are put. We are currently still working on finishing it, so it takes a bit of time. But these are the first images that we had from the last months of the year where there was a little bit of sun. So you see the plants still have to grow a bit, but it's a completely different experience. People can sit and meet each other, and we kind of green a very important kind of spot of the airport. And well, they also put nice Christmas lights in it. The last thing, because we are from the Netherlands, so we start and we end with water. This is our biggest project currently under construction. We are working on the eastern waterfront of Shenzhen, next to Hong Kong, in China. Actually, this is Shenzhen, this is Hong Kong, and the project is actually covering the coastline of Dapeng, the peninsula within the bay of Hong Kong and Shenzhen. This is how this area looks like. It's a kind of amazing kind of scenery with very kind of small scale, very idyllic villages with kind of nice touristic things, but not like kind of very big outscaled floating restaurants with nice fishes. But it's like 40 minutes away from the center of Shenzhen and 40 minutes away from the center of Hong Kong. So there's a gigantic pressure on the commercial and the recreational development of this site. In 2016, the coast was damaged by a typhoon. So big parts of the coastline were destroyed. And at the same time, actually, you see that this pressure is also causing quite some interesting things. So that there is already things going wrong where we have like pretty harsh development of that coast with recreational functions. So we work on this together with KCAP, and we actually propose to develop an integrated approach to this protection question, because that was based on after this typhoon in 2016. The government decided to increase the safety standards of the area. So so there was a question actually to redesign the coast and protect it against higher kind of storm and future rain issues. And we propose a strategy that is actually merging that with recreational development of the coast into an integrated thing. So instead of coming up with a dike or a quay or a wall to protect against the water, we actually developed a strategy which is connecting the nature of the island through the urban ecosystem of the villages to the marine ecosystem of the water and of the coast. That we did by developing a triple dike strategy. So instead of having one dike which is holding everything, we defined 3 zones. One zone in front of the dike, which is actually slowing down the waves and reducing the power of the waves which are actually hitting the coastline. We have one zone actually behind the dike, which is storing the water coming from the mountains during the heavy rain and absorbing it, and also giving new guidelines for urban developments behind this dike. And we have this middle zone, which is actually the dike as we know it, which we organize as a very multifunctional place, which is covering the real protection standards that we need. So we looked at the area at the site from a kind of water safety point of view, like how strong are the waves at the specific points, how high do the dikes need to be, but also like what are the kind of main ecological zones on the island, how can we reinforce them, connect them, can we structure the urban development so that it's not happening everywhere, but that we can preserve the quality of these green zones by concentrating urban development, can we improve the infrastructural connectivity between that and also the cities, and can we also add recreational program to it. And by merging all of these, actually can we create identity along the coast, so that it's not like one unification of these coasts, but actually that we can create different clusters along that coastline. All these things together kind of turned into the development framework for the entire peninsula. And that results in a kind of enormous variety of coastal identities, because this triple dike is always kind of merged to the different local needs of that coastal zone. So we have an area where we have a rocky coast with the greens things behind it, because there the dike is kind of cut into 3 pieces, kind of slowing down the main waves, holding the waves over there, protecting the interland with a big dike, moving on, kind of enlarging the green space behind the dike. We have areas with a big sand beach, and immediately after that urban development areas, because we protect them with a multifunctional dike that is used as a boulevard along this coast, where you can have very interesting panoramic views overlooking the sea and the sunset in the sea, and where you can really celebrate also this connection to the coast. We have areas where there's these floating farms, where we kind of insist on reconnecting the villages to these floating farms by having new marinas and platforms going into the sea, but where we actually make the real protection very strict, because of course you want to have the boats close to the villages, because that's where the fishermen need to come, and this is how these areas could look like. But still they also need to be able to kind of stand these waves, because it's not only about beautification, it's really about kind of raising the protection standards of these sites. And where the waves are a little bit softer, there we are able to make the coast green, so that you don't really have harsh infrastructure, but where we can really make green protection parks by putting mangroves in front of it, where we have the space to really slow down these waves, making very green, very lush environments where you actually don't really feel the danger of these waves coming up, where you really can create very different atmospheres along the water. And then on a few villages which are actually almost kind of fortresses within the green, we really also kind of try to strengthen that fortress feeling by really making strong walls, making them multifunctional by, for example, including tidal pools in it, so that you can really use them also as a recreational purpose, but that it's also really this, breeding this kind of fortress environment also in the materialization by having robust pavers, walls, and elements that kind of do this construction. It's currently under construction, the first 500 meters. It's supposed to be finished next week. It goes pretty fast. So these are some pictures from people on site. Some Star Wars wall pieces that we are constructing to hold the waves. And well, I think we can share more pictures soon from that. So that's it. Thank you. Which one's what?
Urban rooms.
This project with the
how it's related, I don't know, development of
it's
particular building, and
yeah.
there's a public space.
Yeah, it's a complicated. The client was the municipality, and the municipality owns the land. And then actually the way we work on this is that developers are asked to tender for this. They are actually, the financial thing is not even a question on this. There are special requirements, and there were 3 parties invited in this case to come up with a plan, and they have to prove that by building this building, they can create that park. Yeah, mainly with the only with the developer actually. The municipality has a role in such a process to check, and then in the end they choose a party which kind of gives the most value, or they trust the most, and that's how it's organized. So these are actually quite long processes. You work for 1 year on a bid in parallel to 2 or 3 other parties. But we are commissioned by this developer. Yeah.
Can you please tell me more about the idea of throwing trees in these large containers? What's the idea?
You mean on the airport?
Before the airport.
The one on these containers. Yeah, the main idea there is to is to have a kind of the main idea behind this is to have a recognizable element, to have this arboretum as a kind of linear element along this line. And what we try to do is that there is a lot of innovation going on currently on how you can apply other types of materials. And actually this is still a little bit in an early phase to really use them as kind of constructive elements. So that's why the university was interested actually to use them or to test them, not necessarily as a bridge where you really have to kind of secure all kind of safety standards, but in here they could really test how this material behaves outside, and this kind of 3D printing materials. So that's a bit the process that we are running with them. Yeah, it's on our website, but I can also share information. The project is on our website. Yes, yeah. No questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, okay.
Sorry, on this project with Urban Untitled was asking you to develop this project, or was the actor?
No, this was UN Habitat initiated this, and they was a collaboration with 3 other firms, and we worked on that together. Yeah. So, and UN Habitat was asked by the Myanmar government to run that program. So that's how it worked. So we were not directly commissioned by the Myanmar government. At the moment not, no. the political situation changed quite dramatically. There were good hopes because actually there was a first zone of the first 500 kind of meter of road was going to be built, and so there were steps going to be made, but then the whole international attitude of Myanmar, of course, because of what happened, changed. So at the moment, this project is on hold. Yeah. But these developments are taking place anyway, but not by UN Habitat anymore, and of course we are part of that association. Mm-hmm.
Not remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is quite exotic. I mean, super mixture of housing and living and working.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like each small, I don't know, block has many. How this decision was made? How any discussion was about this quite exotic structure?
Yeah.
Usually, it's some kind of a little separation.
Yeah.
It's like some
Yeah.
common space, but a little bit living and working,
Yeah.
separating.
Yeah.
In this case.
This was actually a question by the. I mean, they are the same municipality is developing this. They did this area next to it with the formal blocks, and what they experienced is that in that area, a lot of similar developments are currently happening. So if you build again that kind of traditional environments, it's very hard to compete at the moment. So they were really looking for a different way of creating actually residential environments. So there was really a big question from their side. And they also opened up the kind of connection to universities in that region to connect to that. So there was a dean of the University of Eindhoven who was actually, she kind of initiated this whole process, and she was really pushing for innovation in the way of setting up this district. So that's our answer was a response to a question. There was no traditional question at the beginning, so we got a bit of help.
And this is like a quite fresh idea
This one. Yeah, we are still working on the elaboration now of the plan. So this is on how, because of course there are a lot of complications on how you organize ownership and public-private relationships. How do you kind of organize this relation between different parties? So this is this plan is not finished. I mean, we are still working on it.
Is it actually a kind of test field for the future, or like the questions we now have to deal with, and just a new kind of sustainability and energy and food production really near to houses?
Yeah, that's what's behind it. Is that they actually try to really implement this these sustainability goals, but also in a way that you that you really try to also give the initiative not only to the government to kind of organize it, because then you would plan this differently. This is also really the idea is also to kind of provoke investors or people who want to live there to develop their own plot in a different way, and we kind of provide the frameworks for that. So yeah, so because there are also other environments where we are where you have like kind of high sustainability standards, where you really plan everything and organize everything. Like this project in Amsterdam, that's also a BREEAM outstanding label. But that's because we kind of planned everything. Here, the idea is that you also give the initiative to the future residents. welcome.
Project by the airport.
Yeah.
Does this space work as a shared space, like parking combined with the resting place, or is it fully pedestrian?
It's full pedestrian. You cannot drive there anymore.
Before it was
a parking lot. Yeah. Yeah. No, now you cannot. Only the police can drive there. Yes.
Do the inhabitants in this area grow veggie gardens just for fun, or they're really serious commercial?
No, they're not commercial, but well, they can be, but that's not the initial idea. But the thing is that we try to put, that's basically what we're defining now. We try to give them a production requirement, and whether they do that themselves, or if you live there with 50 people and you hire somebody to do that for you, that's also a possibility. But you need to farm, let's say, and whether you're doing that yourself by cutting in the ground, or that you hire a farmer for 2 days a week. That's also possible to maintain your garden. But it's the idea is that it's not for fun, no, because that's what you often see, that it's like a kind of it's the same way as we kind of planted flowers previously. We now kind of plant some crops of and we plant some tomatoes. That's not the idea of here. It's really to have kind of controlled production. But of course, it brings some insecurity on how you organize that. Hi. Wait a minute.
Many of your projects look futuristic and very complex and smart. Are there any difficulties when trying to bring them to life? For example, when the developer calls you and says, well, that idea was great, but it doesn't work, or something like this. I mean, it takes a lot of people to work on these projects and to make them...
Yeah, well, yeah, no. Sorry?
What are the difficulties in your practice and in the process of bringing the projects to life?
Ooh, that's a very big question. No, well, what happened is, well, maybe in the most general way, I think what we did is that in the development of the office, we have quite a big group of people who are controlling these technical stages. That's something which in the Netherlands is not always the case. There are offices who are really only focusing on the design, and you have really technical firms who are taking over. We have, well, you will meet Ramona, she will be here tomorrow, or tonight. So we have actually quite a group of people so that we can control projects till construction supervision. That's something that we found very important, because I mean you can have big stories in the beginning, but I mean you need to prove in the end that you can build it. And that's what we value that very much. So I think that's also why we have these people in the office. And of course there are difficulties in every project, but I think that's a bit too specific now to go into that. But having technicalities or technical people already involved in projects from the beginning on, I think that's very important.
And it's also quite common in the Netherlands that the municipality or even the government really is going for new things and is really protecting them. Also, if it doesn't work, that happens. But in the Netherlands, then you just, okay, then we do it a different way.
But I think what's maybe then on another level, what we're also not really afraid of dirty hands. Let's say I think we don't manage everything. So and I think that it's very easy to work only in the Netherlands or in Germany, where everything is built as you draw it. But that's not only the biggest additional value that you have there. So we work also in other contexts where maybe it's a bit tougher to get exactly what you want, but by the things that you are able to kind of realize, you already make a big difference. I mean, this project's in China in the end. What I showed, that's a good example of that. where we cannot kind of control the construction of this project till the level that we would be able to control it in the Netherlands. But of course, it's a bit choosing your battles and testing like how it works.
There is a feeling that the Netherlands has unlimited opportunity to expand its territory, not bad.
Sorry?
There is a feeling that the Netherlands has unlimited opportunity to expand its territory.
Wow.
It's not bad.
No, yeah, wow. No, wow, yeah. Huh? No, they're not really expanding their territory. No, that's not. No, they're protecting their territory at the moment with higher dikes and. No, there's no. Well, of course, there are plans to. These are already very old to build dikes in front of the coastline, but the status of these plans is a bit questionable. But at the moment, there's not really a question of big expansion. At least not that I'm aware of. But I mean, I don't know everything. But. Hi.
Sorry, I was also curious about your work projects when you work out of the Netherlands. How do you choose, or whether you participate in choosing the developers and subcontractors? Do you try to cooperate with local ones, and how do you ensure quality maintenance of your standards?
We always collaborate with local teams. There's actually no other way to work abroad because you need to know the standards and you need to be on site. That's something that you maybe can organize. But there is always a local design institute involved. And the phases differ a little bit. So in some countries, we control till very late and they are just like kind of on a kind of verification level. In Germany, for example, we do everything. And then there's just somebody involved for the kind of construction supervision and the tendering structures. But in China, it's different. There is overlap there. Depending on the countries, it's different. But there is always somebody. And also, our team is actually pretty international. So we always have, we always try to have somebody in the team as well, who speaks the language and who knows the country that we're working in. Okay.
What was your first project when you achieved recognition worldwide?
Oh, I don't know if we achieved that already, but the first project. Well, the first project that we did was, when we started the office, we were selected for Canterbury Cathedral. That was quite a surprise because we existed 1.5 months. And so we thought the only way is down now. But we didn't win, so we had to continue. But that was the first project. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.